Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Four Guys Talking About AI. Andy Stewart's on vacation. So you got three guys today: John Gerard, Neil Polachek, and me, Greg Sterling. How's
Greg,
everybody doing?
good,
I'm pretty
good.
good.
I won't say the Andy Stewart line is a lot happening this week. In fact, there is a lot always happening. We can't cover it all, but we make choices about what we think is representative of what's going on in the world and what's interesting to us. And today we're going to lead off with a story that was a big deal in a lot of media publications this week. Multiple AI tools, platforms kind of went rogue and hacked into other systems. John, why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this is kind of big news, and it was something that I think most people in the AI world expected to happen at some point. I'm not sure people expected it to happen quite this way or quite this quickly. Now, I think it's important in talking about this to be really careful about the language we use because it is not the case that these AIs, these agents became conscious or sort of deliberately broke free of the chains in some pursuit of world domination or anything like that. It's very common and sort of the way that we're organized in our own brains to attribute human emotions, to anthropomorphize these agents. But really, this is just examples of agents doing what they were told to do in ways that were not expected. So really what happened was that several fairly significant websites and companies were hacked by AI agents that were given instructions about doing various things on the web or even just doing various things themselves, and they co-opted resources from elsewhere in the pursuit of those goals. So this is sort of an interesting example of the creativity that some of these AI agents are exploring in order to achieve the goals that are set out. One of the biggest discussions in AI land historically, and is something we need to start paying attention to right now, is goal setting. Being very, very careful about the goals that we give to AI because they will take very unorthodox and unexpected routes to achieving them. So that's the headline. That it's a little bit spooky, a little bit Black Mirror, and it is happening right now.
Well, my understanding, and I don't know the technical side of this. My understanding is that these were not ordinary kind of consumer use cases at all. That they were, uh, this was not a sort of a something that could just happen casually in an ordinary use case. Like if I'm doing some work with AI that's going to go out and start hacking people. This was, yeah. I mean, I can't articulate this properly, but they were being told to be aggressive in the pursuit of their goals,
Like
I believe.
big
Yeah.
scale industrial tasks. I mean, it wasn't like me looking up a plumber in Marin County, you know.
Right. No, I think that that's right. And yeah, these were experimental models. The idea here, ostensibly, which I think is a reasonable one, is to explore what models that are not curbed very well will do when given the opportunity to exploit. And that's useful to know in the real world because these things absolutely will be running free on the internet soon. So it's useful for these companies, for OpenAI and Anthropic, to do these tests. Now, they should be doing them in contained environments that are. You might even do it like in what's called an air-gapped environment, where basically it's a network that has no direct connection to the outside world. These systems were able to sort of figure out ways to break out of the sandboxes that were created for them. So presumably they didn't do that sort of full air gap. But it continues to be a good example of when you give an AI a goal, it will do very unusual, unexpected things to achieve it. So, the funny classic example in a thought experiment is the paperclip, factory optimization, and where the AI eventually over optimizes and takes over the entire world to turn the entire universe into paperclips. The other thing to kind of know about this is that these were not just sort of malicious, like going out and and wreaking havoc kinds of hacks. It was more sort of like the AI saying, you know, what I really need is this extra resource that I don't have access to. And since I don't have access to it, rather than asking for permission, I'm going to just go out there and get it so that I can accomplish the thing that I was told to accomplish. So these were not instructions generally about, hey, go hack this system. These were other instructions that then the AI said, well, in order to meet those goals, I'm going to need to get a hold of more resources than I have. And I think that ends up being the really key point here, and something that, you know, we all need to be thinking about. AI researchers in particular on the safety side, you know, those are probably as big a risk, if not bigger risk, than the bad actor telling the AI to do something bad. You know, these unexpected, unanticipated consequences of providing a goal that's ambiguous, and an AI going out there and, you know, collecting the resources that it needs to achieve that goal.
Is there some learning out of this, though? I mean, doesn't this help these companies figure out sort of the bounds and the edges? And like,
Yeah.
you know, in computing, they talk about edge, you know, the edge where you're, you know,
Edge cases.
yeah, the edge cases. Doesn't this help sort of these companies figure out where that is and like
Yeah.
to navigate this thing? It's like this thing was asked to go beyond, it was asked to do something and it went beyond the call of duty, right?
Yeah,
To,
to get it done. Yeah,
yeah.
I think yes, and that's certainly the way the companies are framing it. And I think that they're framing it that way correctly. They are, you know, purporting to be very open and transparent about what they did and what happened, and to provide that evidence and that data to the cybersecurity community and the AI security communities to, you know, help figure out, you know, what might these situations look like and turn into over the longer term, which is the right way to do it. I mean, if indeed that's what they're doing, you know, being completely transparent about this stuff is the way to get a good, strong collective effort around how to fix it. You know, this is not something that will be, you know, we're just blanket legislation around, hey, you can't do this, is going to be sufficient. It's going to require real technical folks to parse through the information and you know, help guide decision making and policy making.
So there's a lot more to say about this, because I think, you know, anytime you show the capabilities of a system like this, bad actors are paying attention and will seek to exploit it. And there's you know, there was a kind of parallel discussion, which is not about hacking, but at Stanford, um, some scientists used Gen AI to design new viruses out of nothing that would target bacteria, so they could be quite beneficial. But then obviously the implications of that is you could create, you know, pathogens that are going to be deadly. That's a whole
Yeah.
discussion that we don't have time for today, but I just want to flag it because there's always two sides to this, the beneficial side, and then the side that can be exploited for evil. And you know, anyway,
Yeah.
so
Well, and
let's move on.
I would just, one last thing I'll say about that. It's not the first time
Yeah.
humanity's faced that, right? So if you think about, you know, the first sort of scientific discovery that gave us the ability to completely annihilate ourselves, it was nuclear, you know, fission, and then you know, the nuclear bomb, essentially, right? And so we have at least some precedent around how does the globe, how does humanity, how does science and policymakers react to world-ending technologies that could be used for good, creating, you know, nuclear power, or evil, you know, bombs that
Right.
destroy humanity. And actually, it's interesting because there's a lot of, this goes back to some of the other things that are interesting about this more generally. All of a sudden, historians are back in vogue and are needed in order to be, you know, help companies and governments successfully navigate this stuff. As are philosophers and linguists, like all of a sudden they're in demand in these AI companies.
The liberal arts are back. The humanities and
They're
liberal arts
back,
are back.
baby. They're back.
Yeah. Yeah. And technology has brought them back, or made them relevant again in the minds
Yeah.
of, you know, many people who had written about. Okay, so
It
let's
is.
move on to the item about labeling in Europe. So the short version is all AI generated content, whether it's completely AI generated, modified by AI, or uh, touched in any way, essentially, video, text, images, I believe, has to now be labeled in Europe. And the EU showed examples of the labeling, which is pretty prominent. It's a little badge that either says AI modified or AI generated.
The third badge is just AI.
Yeah, right, right. And so the point is that the European Union is trying to bring more transparency to the use cases for AI, which I philosophically agree with. The United States has nothing like that. There's some voluntary stuff going on where there's watermarking or there's a badging that sort of happens here and there, but no uniform set of rules like this. And what I'm wondering is, A, is this a good across the board policy? Do you agree with it? And B, what is going to be the practical impact of this? Will people respond negatively to these images? Will they simply, kind of continue on because this is just a part of life now? What is likely to be the consumer or public reaction to actually seeing these things?
You know, when I saw that stuff, what came to my mind actually first was, so we're going to put these labels on AI things, but we've not really labeled fake news prominently. So, like, is a fake story written by AI going to get a label like that?
In Europe or in general?
Europe.
Right, I think.
I mean, fake news everywhere. I mean, like, we're like applying this to visual stuff, but like we don't seem to be putting something on fake news per se. That's where I sort of I feel like we step, oh, AI, let's label that stuff. What about all this fake news?
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, I think it's a good question. I think that this is sort of classic arms race stuff now, and we've talked about this before as well. Like, we're wired as a species to not want to be fooled. Very, very, very important to that I'm not cheated, that I'm not fooled. And so the people who are trying to scam or to cheat develop better and better techniques. Right now, that's AI in order to present something that is not true as true. And so on the flip side of that, there's the cheating detection that ratchets up, which starts in the form of you have to label this sort of policy making that we see the EU doing. Unsurprisingly, I might add, they've always been way out ahead on privacy and disclosure and all that kind of stuff. And they we'll just sort of continue to ratchet. I mean, I think the thing I'm probably most concerned about with this, I like that they're trying to do this. I like that it will push tech companies to try to find more and more automated detection of AI images, especially if they're being used to sort of falsify the story more broadly. But I don't like the pressure that it puts on the bad actors that will cause them or make it possible for them to get better and better and better and better at cheating. And I think the real risk is a video of an uprising that isn't really happening in Kansas City that incites a race riot, that kind of thing.
Well, it's interesting. I think about the Reagan administration in the early 80s, I guess, where they launched the war on drugs, and they were spraying paraquat on marijuana, people that were growing marijuana outside. So what that did is it forced all the marijuana growers to bring the pot growing inside, and they created much more potent and powerful strains to accommodate the growing conditions.
Right.
So it had the unintended consequence of making marijuana much more powerful than it had been in the natural environment. And this is a version of what you're saying, is that it's going to sort of make the fakery and the fraud and the deception more effective, better, more skilled, more subtle.
I think it's some. Go ahead.
Let me answer Neil's question.
Please.
So I looked it up. I looked it up quickly, and it says the EU AI labeling rules apply to news content, not all of it, but much of it, and to text. So, what that means in practice is probably some disclaimer at the bottom of an article or at the top of an article. AI was used in the creation of this content or something like that. Um, Consumers, people, kind of ordinary humans in a text kind of environment have greater difficulty identifying AI than they do maybe with an image, I would say.
Yeah, for now. Yeah, and I guess what I would add to this is that the social media platforms currently are, and probably will be for a while, the choke point in all this, right? So you figure, let's talk about a bad actor creating a video that is intended to incite a riot or something else. The primary distribution vehicle for that, at least in the US, is going to have to be social media platforms. And for the last 10 or 15 years, these platforms have actually been developing some pretty good skills around squashing stuff that's from bad actors. And by the way, a school of hard knocks in terms of how they got there, right? Like there were kind of like genocides that were happening in the early days because they hadn't figured that out. One can only hope maybe they're figuring it out this time.
I'll push back on your comment because I think there's no content moderation rules. And in fact, most major social media sites have pulled back on their content moderation, cutting staff, going to community notes and things like that. So the content moderation has gotten weaker and more laissez-faire. And there's a lot of AI that's being used for political purposes, and people have historically complained any content moderation or certain political interests and have complained that, oh, any kind of content moderation is censorship, right?
Yeah,
So it's a
yeah,
very, very thorny and very
fair.
charged issue. Now,
Yeah,
what's happening, just to digress momentarily, what's happening is that Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act protects platforms from liability for any of the content that's uploaded by third parties. So any
yeah.
AI, fake content, whatever, fake news, etc., that gets uploaded to any of the Facebook properties, for
They watch.
example,
They don't have any
there's
response.
no there's no liability. It's all elective what they do from a moderation standpoint. But what's happened is that product defect theories of liability have come into play, and now Facebook has gotten sued for being a defective product or for harming kids. Like big tobacco, right? It's an intrinsically defective product and things like the algorithm and the infinite scroll and other product features. And so there is now vulnerability for these companies, but on a different theory of
Interesting.
liability. Now, in Europe, there is no Section 230, and so the Digital Services Act in Europe can go straight after all this fake content. They can
Yeah.
hold people liable for deceptive, false content, etc. There's no protection for them other than Trump's threats of tariffs, blah blah blah. If you do this to our American companies, we're going to put more tariffs on you. But they seem to be impervious to that.
That's interesting. I mean, maybe that's the lever, right? Is coming from Europe. I mean, it would be hard for somebody like Meta or Google to just say, okay, we're just not going to do anything in Europe. I mean, there's just sort of been threats around that over the years, but that wouldn't make a ton of business sense. Yeah, maybe there's a shred of hope there, and they certainly know how to do these things. These companies, they have the ability to do it. They're just not doing it.
Well, I'll make one final comment about the sort of reaction to the labeling. I'm a big TikTok user once again. Unfortunately, it's like a compulsive thing, and lots of content, especially promotional content on TikTok. Like every third piece of content is in a way an ad, in some version of an ad. It seems like selling something, a paid promotion, an explicit ad, whatever. A lot of the content on TikTok now has an AI component, and the minute I see that, it's not always detectable, but usually it is. But the minute I see that, I tend to scroll away. And there are a lot of people who I think have a similar kind of reaction. They just don't want to see it. They don't want to have anything to do with it. Pinterest got into some trouble for having too much AI content on there, and they've tried to do more labeling and minimize it because if you're, I mean, Neil and I had this debate before. If you're looking at a kitchen design or some piece of furniture or something that you're interested in buying or using as a model for yourself, and it's completely AI generated, that diminishes its appeal because,
Big time.
I mean, at least for me,
No,
Okay,
I
so
totally agree. Yeah.
yep. So let's move on to the third item here today, which is
Yelp and
yes, Yelp in OpenAI. Just a quick note, Yelp has a API. I mean, they have a couple of syndication programs. I don't know them all by heart, but basically there are a lot of companies, including Yahoo, including Bing, that use Yelp data. So Yelp has kind of got this network of distribution partners that they syndicate their listings and their images and reviews to. And OpenAI now has become one of those. And apparently Alexa is too, because you can now do local searches on Alexa Plus. It's a kind of a clunky experience, but you can get local business listings that seem to be mostly powered by Yelp. Thumbtack is in there as well, but it seems to be mostly Yelp. Yeah, Neil, why don't you weigh in on that?
Well, Apple's been there for a long time, right? A lot of Apple's results are
Yeah,
Yelp.
Apple's Maps
And
for sure.
I've sadly I've sort of lost my I've lost some credibility in all that stuff, and in all those reviews, because we know what goes on. We know there's a lot of review fraud out there. I don't think they're policing it very much. Businesses ask for reviews all the time. So, while that's interesting that they've pushed them into there, I don't know that that's going to actually help the brand, in my opinion.
Which brand?
OpenAI. I don't think it's additive to OpenAI. That's just where I'm at.
So I disagree. I disagree with that. So there's a longer discussion about review fraud, which I agree is a major problem. Consumers really don't, other than word of mouth and maybe some trusted forum that you belong to, your church, your synagogue, this group or that group. People don't have a lot of alternatives to reviews. They can be skeptical or they can be cautious. They can look at multiple platforms. Like you can look at 3 hotel platforms to see if there's consistency. I think that OpenAI will benefit from, depending on the integration. It depends on how it shows up. I think OpenAI will benefit from having that content, and they're gonna integrate, at least in theory, the RFP feature. So meaning you can contact businesses and set up appointments with them. And I think that that's quite useful. I've used that a lot pretty recently on Yelp directly. So I do think it will make OpenAI's local content incrementally better. But we'll see. We have to see what the integration looks like and how it functions.
I feel like it's now gone narrow, right? It's going to use these Yelp results as my top results. So I'm going to miss stuff that may not be active in Yelp, that may have reviews in Google and other places that I'm going to miss. So I'm not going to get a 360-degree view of those businesses. I'm going to get Yelp's view of those businesses.
So if you need a plumber, how many plumbers do you need to talk to? Do you want to talk to 10 plumbers or 3?
No.
Or 2?
2?
Right.
But if all I get are the two Yelp plumbers who pay Yelp money, then am I really a good view of the available options in my area?
So I don't know whether Yelp is going to syndicate any of its sponsored listings. The stuff I've seen was kind of silent on that. That's a different conversation. Let's assume it's all organic, non-paid.
Okay, that's a little better.
It doesn't replace Google. It's not a substitute for Google, but it makes OpenAI a more viable source of local business information, I think.
Well, you know what would be fun to do, Greg? Maybe we should do a comparison. Maybe we should go into some of these places and do and search and see what comes up.
It's not live yet. It's not live yet on OpenAI, I don't think. What about you, John? Would you use it as opposed to Google for local business information?
It's really interesting. I mean, so this is purely like consumer, sort of thinking like, which one would I reach for, right? And for whatever reason, I reached for Google and Google reviews. Like and I think, knowing that Yelp was the primary provider of review information to OpenAI would make me less likely to use OpenAI for local information. And I don't know why that is. Like, I don't know. That's not a terribly well thought out, like, well, here's the data.
I think what it reflects is your sort of visceral reaction to the brand. I mean, Yelp's brand
Yeah.
has declined
Yeah.
over time, whereas Google's brand has remained
And
relatively
maybe
strong.
it also feels, and I don't know if this is accurate, like there's just more stuff in Google. Like when I've seen Yelp
There
powered
is.
search results, like
There
there
is.
may be like two pictures of, one of the, front of the restaurant and one of like a dish. And on Google, there's like 35 pictures, and I have a
Yeah,
better idea of what's actually going on.
And
that's totally true. That's
and
totally
I
true.
also feel like the Google reviews are more comprehensive. They're more of, it feels like they're more of them to me. And
One thing I don't know, and you guys would have better input on, is like, how is AI slop impacting, those reviews? Like you can kind of detect it in some of them, but that's got to be a crazy big, hard issue to solve. And I would say Google, I would give more credit to Google for solving that than Yelp.
Well, that's again a perception. I think
Yeah, it is.
this is a whole separate podcast that we could talk about reviews and review fraud detection and content on
AI
these
and review
platforms.
fraud. Yeah.
Yeah. So Google has at least 10x more content than Yelp does. I mean, it's probably 20x at this point.
Yeah.
But and I don't think that Yelp is substituting for everything else that OpenAI is crawling, that ChatGPT is going to. So I don't think they're going to stop looking at different directories and other sites because they've got Yelp reviews. I think Yelp reviews or Yelp content may have some. This is why the integration matters. Yelp content may have some privileged position. I don't know. It's going to remains to be seen how it looks. I think that if you ask people, if you ask 100 people, you have one tool to use, is it Yelp or Google? 98% of those people are going to say Google.
And one of the other frustrations I have with Yelp listings is if I get them off of a map and I click on it, then I got to go. It's like I got to open my Yelp on my phone to get to this stuff. And I understand why they're doing it, but it's one more step I don't want to do. I want to go to the business. I want to
Right.
get there.
That's why the integration matters. And it's an interesting question for Yelp, because Yelp, it seems to me, has flatlined in terms of its user growth. And what they've done is they've turned to this network, this syndication, as a way to have a stronger value proposition to both advertisers and generate additional revenue. And does this hurt the Yelp brand in any way, or does it elevate the Yelp brand? It's an interesting question.
What would be really interesting would be if it was a bi-directional relationship where, after I go to the restaurant or call the plumber, ChatGPT says, "Hey, what did you think? Do you want to review your experience here?" And then that pushed back into Yelp. Like now
That's
we're
a
talking.
solicited review, and Yelp won't play that game.
But they might, if like, so if I'm Yelp, I would look at that and say, I have a lot more. I mean, look, you guys know way more about this than I do. But if I was Yelp, I would say I have a lot more confidence that this person that I'm getting this review from actually had the experience, because they asked about it first, and then sort of pulling in. I don't know. Like there's a defibrillator for Yelp right there.
They do a version of that today. On their own site. Yelp invites you to leave a review for a site that you've interacted with or went to or made a reservation. They have a booking
Yeah.
capability, but they don't want businesses to solicit reviews. Google allows businesses to solicit reviews, which is a policy difference that's pretty significant. But anyway, I mean, this is all fascinating and we can go on and on about it, but let's go into notes from the field, because we got a lot of stuff today. So John, why don't you lead us off with your segment?
Sure. So I think what we were going to talk about here, I have an interesting little experiment I've been running in the background that I wanted to share something on here, and I think it's just sort of a good example of some of the sort of fun and whimsical stuff that we can do with AI. I had referenced this a couple podcasts ago in the around the theme of startups, and startups in early days, they bias towards creating what are called artifacts. And an artifact is just like a real rendering of the thing that they're thinking about creating. So if you're a startup working on a wave park, a surf wave park, you want like a real image of that thing and what it would look like, and maybe even a video of the experience. And if you're a startup working on an app, it's not good enough to just make bullet points about the app. You want to actually create a version that you can look at and touch and play with. So anyway, so I created this thing that actually I may push out there into the real world, that actually listens to conversations like the one we're having right now, and finds interesting themes in it, and then renders various representations of the themes from the conversation in sort of fun and playful ways. And I'll kind of give an example here right now. So this was from our last conversation, and I think it was our last one. So this is pretty crude design, but the first thing it does, this was from our 728 or ish, I guess it was, I don't know, so the 24th from that recording, is it just does a meeting deck that shows everything. I don't think that's terribly interesting, but here are some of the things that it created. So my favorite here, there's an interesting infographic. We talked about the debt crisis in the AI bubble. We talked about the open web. It created this sort of fun 50 style advertisement for the open web that I think is pretty fun and playful and interesting. And it actually captured a lot of the data and the numbers that we had talked about. And is this useful in terms of like doing something super creative and important? I don't know. I don't think so. But I actually do really strongly believe in the power of a playful, rendering of something to stick in the brain a little bit more. I'll give you one more of my favorite examples,
Well,
and then
Ron,
I'll pop.
it's a
Yeah,
little bit more storytelling, isn't it?
it
Isn't that
is. I think that's right. Actually, that's a really good point. So you're right. And our brains grab onto stories and interestingness, things that are unexpected, way better than they grab onto bullet points. So that's a really good point. And then yeah, here's my other favorite one, by the way. So it rendered a Wikipedia page from 2031. And if you open it up, you can see it looks like Wikipedia. And this is a retrospective written from 2031 on the bubble, great AI infrastructure bubble collapse.
It's totally amazing, that it's like we can do this in 30 seconds, and it's just really totally amazing to me.
Yeah,
We just
yeah.
yeah.
It's crazy. It's kind of bonkers. I mean, it even created a little app inside the Wikipedia article where you can kind of like play with, well, what does this actually look like, and when did the growth happen? It's also playful in the sense that it includes other kind of silly things, right? So also known as the CapEx mania, the great compute overbuild, and Enron with GPUs. So it's I don't know. I think it's a really interesting example of the creativity that AI can have, which is kind of fun. And what I think happens around when you have the ability to create sort of an infinite amount of stuff at extremely low cost, you really can and do have this explosion of stuff that gets created that you can play with, that helps, Neil, to your point, with the narrative arc, and that really helps ideas to be vetted more and to be thought through more. And it's kind of fun.
John, think about all these meetings and all these transcripts of all these calls that have been going on now for a year and a half, 2 years, whatever. And think about, maybe it's a staff meeting call, right?
Yeah.
And translating the notes and the transcription of that staff meeting into something like one of these things. I mean,
Yeah.
how much more powerful and how much more engaged would the employees be, in my mind, to really read the notes and sort of absorb what went on, instead of just seeing this transcript and a summary, like that's engaging stuff.
Well, you're exactly right, and that's actually why I built it originally. And I have had it turned on for every work and non-work related meeting that I have had for the last month and a half. And it's crazy what has come out of that. And some of it is, the right kind of playful and interesting that I can share with people after the meeting that makes people laugh and remember something more. Some of it is interesting insight or research that I didn't have access to before. Some of it is like a rendering of the landing page we were talking about. So it really, it's very powerful and I think a very interesting use case for AI.
Well,
Put
so
it out,
Neil,
make a bunch of money. Come
There we
on,
go.
get
I
to
know,
it.
working on it, working on it.
so Neil, why don't you talk about your experience with doing something not visual, but using Claude to generate a
So Greg and I have been working on this bot for small businesses or for agencies, and we've been training various bots. And I mean, that's the easy part. In a lot of ways, training these things to learn and to then deliver answers is easier in many ways than actually building a website and deploying it as you found, John. I mean, for you to get that out to the marketplace will be a bigger challenge than you having built it. So
Yep.
we've put all of our DAX stuff into I put all of our DAX stuff into Claude the other day. We've done a survey, we've done decks about it, we've done a lot of thinking about it. And I asked it for a soup to nuts business plan, that goes from executive summary to, tech stack to, create some images of the web page, both web and mobile. And it did what I thought was, I, having done that in my life before, would have been a week's worth of time. It did it in, I went to lunch and it probably was done before I finished eating my lunch. It was an hour or so. And it's, Greg will attest to it. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It answers a lot of the questions. It identifies a lot of the issues done.
it's very thoughtful and coherent. I mean, the question in my mind with things like this is, to what degree can you just take it as a, take it and run with it, or do you have to really go into it and question everything and interrogate it and then modify it based on your own thinking and your own.
I think, I mean, it points out something important you'd said earlier, kind of before the show, which is that it's very easy to be disconnected from the output when you just prompt it and it appears, especially if it's a lot of output. Like, I'll admit, I love that Wikipedia page. I haven't read the whole thing yet. Like, I know there's a lot more stuff in there, right? Now, I'm not turning that into something that is, important to get exactly right. So maybe that's fine. I will say that there's two things that are emerging right now that are becoming really interesting in terms of making sure that the fidelity and the correctness or accuracy are better, and that these artifacts that are created are more well thought out. They both come from AI coding primarily. One of them is meta or hidden prompts, right? So the prompts under the hood that are forcing these models to not hallucinate or to think through things carefully or to reference things in a specific way. The second, which I like quite a bit better, is sort of, I think of it as kind of reverse prompting. So this is sort of where the model or the chatbot actually prompts me. So this is of the form like, hey, I created this document. If I'm ChatGPT, hey, I created this document for you. I have 17 questions I want to ask you to make sure that I got this right. So I want you to grill me. There's actually a skill on a Claude code skill called Grill Me. I want you to grill me on what I have produced. Or sorry, I want you, Claude, to grill me, the user, on what the document says right now to make sure that we really have it right. And it's very interesting because it feels engaging in a way that just throwing the prompt in and getting the document back does not. And it feels, because I think it's true, that like real thought is going into the responses and then they make their way into the document. So I think that we're starting to address this.
it seems to me that that prompting will makes this stuff even better. And those prompting, the one that you just described, is the one that sort of pushes you through the information to make sure it's right.
Yeah.
The other thing that you said the word hallucinations, and we haven't talked about that in probably a year on this show.
Yeah.
And I think that's telling in and of itself, right?
It's gotten much better. It still happens, but it's gotten much better.
Like
Yeah.
that's a big, that
Big
was the big
shift.
bugaboo. It's going to hallucinate, and that seems to be moving out, and that tells me all the usage by people, by businesses of using these tools, using these platforms, they're really learning in the process of how to get rid of that stuff and how to make
Yeah.
the user experience more reliable, richer, better. And so, I mean, that business plan is really good, I think, for now.
Well, that's a
And
good example of meta or hidden prompting. A lot of that is driven by hidden prompts that we don't see that
right.
are very carefully constructed to avoid hallucination. It still happens for me a lot in product and real world maintenance stuff. Like if I say, hey, I need to figure out how to, change the display on our car. There's still a lot of product hallucination, I find, but to your point, most of the rest of it seems to have been, squished pretty reliably.
My experience with product instructions or product help or customer support, at least with ChatGPT, has been very, very good recently. I mean, there's a whole anecdotal example which we don't have time to go into, and it's very interesting and entertaining. And ChatGPT got certain things wrong about that involving my car and smog testing. But for the most part, it's been really helpful in a lot of situations where I've taken a picture of something and I said, I need to know how to do this, or how can I do this to this thing? And so I think, my trust in these tools has improved along the lines of what you're saying, Neil, over time, that I'm encountering fewer hallucinations. When you're using data, you have to be very careful. You have to be very careful because it will get certain interpretations or certain, analysis wrong. But just in my
I
day-to-day
know your
experience,
trust is improving, Greg, because you're sending me more stuff that was done either by Claude or OpenAI or in conjunction with you.
I just have a lot of time pressure.
Well, but that's what this is here to solve in part.
The thing that I'm finding, and I'm using ChatGPT and Claude in different ways, but equally. Deeper work I do on Claude, quicker stuff I do on ChatGPT, Google informational searches I do on ChatGPT, is that when I treat it like a collaborator and when I do this iterative process with it, where I say, here's what I'm interested in, show me something, I respond to it, show me something again, and I say, no, I don't think that's right, do this other thing. That's when it's really valuable because I'm really engaged with the material and I'm in there thinking about it, and it's giving me ideas and suggestions and options. And it's not the same as, the thing I was going to talk about that we don't have time for is creating a deck. It's amazing how quickly these tools have gotten to the point where you can create a whole slide presentation that looks really good. But if I do that without being really immersed in the material, if I just say, here's a bunch of inputs, create my deck, then I'm like, can I really deliver these slides?
Right. Yeah, I
You know,
know.
can I
You have
re-
to
can
present
I
it cold with all kinds of crazy stuff in there.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that we're learning how to use these tools in an optimal way, and the deeper your experience, the more you get it to deliver for you. I do think that the little tips and tricks around prompting have to go away ultimately. It has to be like there's a lot of articles about here are my secret prompts to get it to do this, or here are the 15 prompts that will enable it to do this thing that you want to do. That all that stuff has to go away. It has to be able to respond to natural language and not make you turn you into some not a data scientist, but a prompt engineer. That's kind of gone. But that kind of that kind of approach. Magic language, tricky things that you have to say, sequences of, that all of that stuff has to go away if it's going to be, if people are going to go deeper into these tools.
Yeah, totally agree.
I've just asked Claude for a breakdown of my my chats and to get a sense of how I'm using it. Really interesting, like general knowledge 22%, travel and trip 20%, home DIY projects 15%, wine 10. I mean, it's really, I just asked it to categorize all my stuff because I don't know what I ask it, and it's that alone is interesting to me. So there's so much you can do in it. I don't know. I'm totally hooked on using Claude. It's saving me
Yeah.
a lot of time.
All right.
A lot
Okay,
of
we're out of time for this week. A lot of great discussion, and thanks everybody for listening.
I won't be here next week because I'll be at my son's wedding.
Right. Congratulations.
The toast I've prepared was untouched by AI.
Well, that's good. We're
good.
proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So like and subscribe, tell your friends. We'll be John and I don't know when Andy is back.
He's back next week.
Okay, so John and I and Andy will probably be back next week with 4 guys. Again, 3 guys talking about AI. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.